Somehow it has already been 3 months since the Galaxy Z Fold 7 came out, and I thought it would be smart or maybe just fun to take a look at this device now 3 months on and see how it's holding up and see if any of my thoughts about this phone have changed since my initial review. And like in that review, we're going to start off by talking about the hardware now that it has been 3 months, and some of this has actually been spent with just a skin on the back. I'd say for the last couple of weeks, I've had this clear case, I should say, with a magnetic ring on the back on it. But for a lot of this, it has been basically caseless. So I think it would be cool to see how this thing is holding up. And I have good news on that front. I have absolutely no complaints, hard to get that thing to focus, with the hardware of this device and how it is holding up. No dings, scratches, dents, anything like that that would give me concern. No like obvious signs of wear on the device. It looks essentially brand new. Now I have had a screen protector on the front of this the entire time. I started off with a glass screen protector, and then I removed that and I used one of the anti-glare films that Samsung sells, and that looked really, really good. But it also got scratched up really, really easily. So I took it off and I put a tempered glass screen protector back on. So my front screen is still absolutely perfect and pristine. The inside screen, I think, looks pretty good. There aren't any obvious problems going on there, any obvious scratches or dings. I have had a few times. Maybe you can see right there at the tip of my finger. Let's see if I can get this on camera. I might not be able to. There is a tiny little dent right there, and it's really, really small. And the reason I point it out is because it's happened a few times where there's been probably some tiny little piece of particulate that was in here whenever I closed it, and then whenever I opened it, I would have a dent here and a corresponding dent on the other side. But the cool thing about that is it just kind of goes away. I don't know exactly what they're doing or how that works, but they just kind of vanish after a little while. So I've been quite pleased with the durability of this phone so far. Granted, I've not dropped it. I'm quite careful with my devices, so that's not really been a huge concern. But again, hardware holding up just fine. You've heard rumors and pictures of paint chipping and things like that. I just use the same chargers I always use, mostly from Ugreen. It occurred to me while editing that some of you may be wondering why I just randomly mentioned what brand of chargers that I've been using. The paint chipping thing is apparently related to using sort of non-approved third-party chargers. I have not had that issue. I've only used third-party chargers, like I said, mostly from Ugreen. Haven't had that problem. That's why I said that. And I just haven't had any of those issues. The hardware's holding up really, really well. The only real complaint I have would be this, the the camera bump wobble, which, you know, isn't really helped all that much by different cases. But if you do a case like this, and then maybe you also do something like this ring from whatever company this was. I'll put a link in the description down below. Now you don't have a wobble anymore. Now you're fine. You're stable and so forth. So a lot of the time, that's how I've used the device anyway. So yeah, this continues to be a device that just feels fantastic in the hand. And even when I'm jumping back and forth between different devices, like I've got my Pixel 10 Pro Fold here, and I've got my Honor Magic V5 as well, what happens is when I'm using one of these devices, I pick this one up, and it just feels so good to me for whatever reason. I love the weight of this thing. I really like the way it feels. And that's a subjective thing, right? Some of you are going to feel differently. But for me, it's a device that every time I pick it up, I just kind of want to put my SIM back in it. And if I kind of bring these other two back in, I can't really show you this today because it's been overcast for the last, I feel like, month straight of my life. But when I have these devices outside and it's bright and so forth, the Z Fold 7 does hold up to that brightness, I feel like, better than these other two. The Pixel could potentially at times be brighter at peak, but it doesn't stay there very long. This phone holds up the longest. It gets more than bright enough for me and stays there the longest. It's just really a device that, in terms of the hardware, I don't really have anything negative to say about it. Although there are some things that are, they're still hardware. They're just not maybe build quality, which is really what I'm talking about, that I would, love to see some improvements to. The speakers, for one thing, I just don't like how they're positioned. They're both on the left side when the device is open, so I don't like to rotate my device. I just want to open it and use it. I don't want to have to do this every time I'm playing media. So that's a little bit annoying that the audio comes out of the left side basically exclusively. There's not really any stereo separation there, obviously, because it's on the left. And of course, I'd like to hear them be a little bit louder. When you're comparing them to something like the Honor Magic V5 or the Pixel 10 Pro Fold, both of those devices just push a little bit more sound, and that is a really nice thing to have. These are not terrible, right? When you compare them to, let's say, something like the Oppo Find N5 that I have here, they're better than that. They're not nearly as awful as these speakers are, but they're still not quite as good as I would want. I've also really grown to just enjoy the One UI software experience more and more as time goes on. I have found myself getting very used to doing this to do split screen multitasking. And even though I've said in the past, I don't really love the fact that it's just an app drawer, a lot of the time the app I need is right here, so that's still okay. If I grab the Honor Magic V5, we'll do kind of the same thing here. It's a swipe up and to the side, and what I like about this is you see your desktop, so you can just kind of muscle memory pick another application, whereas for Samsung, you're using an alphabetical app drawer. There's not really as much muscle memory there. But again, I've gotten really used to doing that little gesture to get into split screening. And what I really like about it is that if I go into this and I want to change that app out again, I can just do it again. And I found myself using the taskbar less and less. But I do continue to use AI Select, and it's not probably for the reason that they actually intend it to be used. A lot of the time, what I end up using it for is almost like the snipping tool in Windows. I'll do Windows Shift S and I'll snip something, and then I'll just copy it to my clipboard and then send that off in a text message or a Discord. I'm doing the same thing here to just quickly send screenshots of things to people without actually screenshotting and saving it to my device. As always, having stackable widgets is really nice. I love having a Google search there that can go over to a Gemini widget. I love having my YouTube music that can switch over to Audible. I love having my my to-do list for the channel on top of my shopping list. Like, that stuff is so cool. It's so useful and it's so smart. Here's something that I used literally yesterday when I was making a thumbnail for the channel. I needed to pop something out from an image. So I can throw it over to my Samsung phone and long press on that object and it will pop it out from the image. And then I can just send this over to my PC directly. I can click on share and I can go into CX File Explorer. There's my computer, there's my downloads folder, and now it is in my downloads folder, ready for me to go grab it and throw it into a photo editor and make my thumbnail with it. I find that to be incredibly useful. There's just so much to like about the software experience here on this device. I've also really enjoyed the new clock on the lock screen. I'll show you how this works. We'll just use this image that I just had on here, and it's going to scan this, and it's going to try to kind of understand what this image is. And if I bring the clock up here, this is not a great example, but you can see how it's trying to like kind of move the numbers around the object that is in the image so that the numbers will kind of like fall off of the image. And I've come up with some pretty cool lock screens doing this. It's really neat. I would love to see another one that maybe has depth where things can go on top of the clock just a little bit or something like that, but this is a really cool start. Unfortunately, it doesn't work with everything just yet. Like this one here, it doesn't seem to be able to recognize this as a thing to kind of pop out around. Now, apparently that's going to be improved with One UI 8.5, but for now, not quite perfect yet. Something else that's not quite perfect is going to be the battery life, and I've talked about this so many times, I almost feel like this is just so redundant to continue talking about it. But this is still a device that, for me, can get me through the day. If it's a heavy day, you might find me, dropping it onto my wireless charging stand, or if I'm out driving around, plugging it into a car charger or something like that. But it's not a phone that literally a single solitary time have I gotten to the end of the day and I was unable to use it for the full day, where I just didn't have time to charge it when I needed to, or whatever it might be. And if I don't have the ability to charge this thing, I'm still able to get through a full day without too much trouble. I might have to think about it a little bit, maybe slow down on some of my use here and there, but it's not a problem for me, is how I would describe it. Do I want it to be better? Absolutely. We have the Pixel 10 Pro Fold. We have the Honor Magic V5. And I feel like if you're going to rank these phones in terms of batteries, I mean, yeah, it's 1, 2, and 3. And I feel like the gap between each is about equal. When you go from the Fold 7 to the Pixel 10, that's a decent gap. And when you go from the 10 to the Honor Magic V5, that is also a decent gap. So I would love to see them, push that battery capacity up to be more in line with those other two devices and get that longevity up just a little bit more. But again, not a problem for me. Another thing I always end up missing whenever I'm not using this device is Samsung DeX. And I know that other phones do have a desktop mode, but none of them are as good or as polished as this one is. Honor Magic V5 has theirs. The Pixel one is coming along, but this is still just the top one around. None of them are as polished or as useful as this one is. In conjunction with my lap dock here, it's just a fantastic experience. And then, of course, we do need to talk about the cameras. And this is a place where my thoughts have evolved, I think, a little bit. The primary sensor, I think, is still quite good. I like the way that colors are reproduced. They're amped up just a little bit, which I think is a good thing. I do wish that, much like on the Pixel devices, things were just a little bit punchier. I would like to see a little bit more contrast. I feel like we've kind of moved away from that look over the last few years, and I don't really know why that is. I like a nice punchy looking photo. The ultra wide is the ultra wide. I virtually never use that sensor at all, but it's totally fine. And then the telephoto, I think, is the place that, like I said in those initial reviews, that I have the biggest problem with. The sensor is just too small. In good lighting at 3 or 4x, it looks totally fine, but it's going to break down pretty quickly at more extreme zooms, or if lighting starts to degrade. The thing that has really started to stand out for me over the last couple of few weeks, something like that, is the noise in the processing of these photos. I did mention it in those earlier reviews, but it's really starting to irk me more and more as I do use camera systems from Google or Honor or other cameras like that, where they're kind of finding a different balance. It feels like what Samsung is doing is they're trying to retain more detail by not doing too much noise reduction, where you start to kind of get this like oil painting look. They're not doing that, but I think that they're too far in the other direction. There's a balance to be found where you're not an oil painting and you're not a noisy mess when it comes to lower light or sort of finer details in shadows. They need to find that balance a little bit better than they have. But those are really my only two complaints. Video continues to look very, very good with this device. I use it to shoot B-roll on this channel fairly frequently. While it's not as consistent as the Pixel camera in terms of just getting things in focus, even when they're moving, I think that it's more than good enough. This is a camera system that I have no real problems using. I just wish the zoom was better, and I wish that they handled noise a little bit better than they do. In my initial review, I called it the return of the king, and then I told you guys that this had dethroned my Pixel 9 Pro Fold and had become my favorite foldable. 3 months on, now there's a new Pixel Fold, which has impressed me more than I thought it would, and I've also spent over the last maybe 2 weeks, 10 days, a lot more time trying to give the Honor Magic V5 a second chance. I'm sure you may have already seen that sort of re-review video, and that has kind of changed my perspective. Those two devices have changed my perspective a little bit on the Z Fold 7, but here's the reality. Between these 3 phones, it's really just become an absolute mess for me because I am switching my SIM between them at a ridiculous pace. And I think that that speaks to just how good all 3 of these phones really are. And the amazing thing is I like them all for different reasons. I pick up one and it pulls me in for one reason, the other one for its own reason, and the last one for its own reason. And the Z Fold 7 holds its own against those other phones in its own Samsung way. It is not the most perfect phone in the world. It does have some shortcomings, but it is still an absolutely excellent phone. And if you want an easy answer, you love multitasking, you love Samsung DeX, you're just a Samsung person even, that would be a great reason to go with this phone. I think you're going to really like it. It is still a fantastic phone. Guys, subscribe for more content just like this, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.